And I must say, for most part, I do see Meta underreporting. So I don't see them showing up these crazy numbers I hear from like Google, where they kind of model out 3x the conversions that actually happened.
Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds. This is the podcast for growth marketers. My name is John Koetsier. Today is a different episode. We're going to do something funky. We're going to do something cool. We have a great guest who knows a heck of a lot about a heck of a lot of stuff. And we're going to have like a freaking potpourri episode, man. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to bring up lots of stuff and just get our guests' opinion, ideas, speculation, total, off the cuff, see how it goes. So who is that guest? Well, our guest is Marcus Burke. And if you're on LinkedIn and if you're into UA, user acquisition, growth marketing, mobile, all that stuff, you've probably seen his name. You've probably seen him post something. You've probably seen him say, hey, I was doing a campaign. This is what I saw. This is what I'm seeing. Here's what's working. Here's what's not working. You can hardly avoid him, in fact, even if you want to. No, who would want to do that? Marcus, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here, John. I'm glad we finally made time for this. I've been planning for a while. Looking forward.
Finally is right. We've been planning this for like a couple months, so it's all good. We're making it happen. That's great. Maybe let's start here. Let's start with you. Let's start with your background history, how you got into this space. Who the heck is Marcus Burke? The world wants to know.
Does it? Okay. So
desperately.
I mean, I've been in this space for like a little over 12 years now. Started my career in gaming in like one of the big German gaming companies called InnoGames. Actually stuck around for quite a while, 7 years at my first time job. So by the end, I was definitely one of the people in marketing that's been there the longest. Switched to subscription apps in 2019, working for Blankist for a while, tried a few other ad tech startups here and there in the upcoming years, became like the growth lead for a language learning app in Berlin, but then noticed that kind of the original career path I was imagining wasn't the best fit for me because I didn't really enjoy kind of climbing the career ladder, managing people and being less and less operative. So I switched to being a consultant in 2022. I think, end of 2022. Been doing that full time since then, and it's been growing great, especially due to LinkedIn. So maybe that's one of the pieces we can talk about. It's definitely, I like to advocate for it, and I think everyone should be kind of trying to post at least a couple of times a week because it's been such a huge lever for my business in the end, and I think it could be for many more.
I can totally see that. One thing I want to just highlight, you started your career, you stayed with the company for like 7 years. I want to just put a exclamation mark on that and like a little happy face and a heart emoji. There's a lot of people, especially in tech, maybe especially in the United States, who are like grabbing a job and they're hopping every 2 years and everything like that. There's something to be said. There's some value in where you find yourself. If it's a good place, learning and growing, you learn a lot of different niches. You learn a lot of different pieces and components that if you skip, sometimes you don't, hey?
Definitely. I would say probably you can kind of climb the career ladder faster by switching around because usually switching the job means it comes with a promotion or the next higher level.
And more money.
Yeah, so that's kind of the incentive behind it. But in the end, like during those first 7 years, I learned a ton and it was a great time to be in the gaming industry. There were like huge budgets. Mobile was just starting. When I started, it was a browser games company. By the end, like 70-80% of our profits were in mobile. And that was just crazy time. And like I learned so much. I built Meta as a channel for that company. We grew from me managing it at like 50K a month to an 8-person team managing 2 million a month. In the end, I had a really, really good time, and I was happy to stay those 7 years. Yeah.
What a cool time going from a browser-based, Farmville era type thing, right? To
Pretty much,
mobile.
Yeah. Tribal Wars was their original game, and it was really just a bunch of tables in the end, and you put in numbers. If you wanted to send troops, there were no animations or anything. You just said, I'm sending 200 soldiers, and it was just, in the end, a table that you put it in.
Old school RPG style.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into it. So this is the potpourri episode. We're gonna throw everything at the wall. We're gonna see what sticks. We're gonna start with free trials. one of the things, and I think the key reason that we started chatting is I saw you post something about that on LinkedIn. I'm almost certain about this. And that was like 2 months ago. And I said, hey, we want to chat about that. You said something along these lines, and I'm paraphrasing. So if I get it wrong, just tell me I'm an idiot. You said why free trials are a disaster for your business. Talk about that.
I mean, it's also one of these hot take lines, right? So that you get
Yes,
engaged
exactly.
on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
When you need to go
Um,
viral on LinkedIn. No.
I could have had added a hot take in front of it, but I think there's definitely there's a truth to it, and that's why I wanted to post about it, because in the end, especially for apps that are driven heavily by paid user acquisition, if you want to spend on Meta, on Google, then you will be running campaigns that are targeted and optimized based on a machine learning algorithm. So in the end, if you want these campaigns to succeed for you and to make good business decisions, they need to be fed with signals that in the end allow them to get a good understanding of your business. And a trial for many, many businesses is not that signal, because as you start out, your trial conversion might be as low as like 30% percentage. Everyone working in subscription apps knows there is this cohort which will kind of start a trial and then switch it off right away because they don't want it to renew into a paid subscription. So they never really have the intent of even paying. They just want to check out the paid version of the app. We did some testing with that when I was at Blinkist, and we saw that that cohort was basically we couldn't convert them. If we sent them discounts, if we sent them anything, they didn't want to pay. They're not payers. So in the end, that's the signal you're sending to Meta when you're optimizing for that trial, at least partially. I mean, there's also people in there that will convert, but Meta then uses that data in order to define your targeting and in order to find more of these people for you. And hence, you definitely want to question or at least be aware of this and then guide the algorithm in a different direction. For many apps, that, for example, means excluding younger age groups because they are one of the ones that tend to start trials heavily but then never convert.
Super interesting, right? I mean, and you're just going from, hey, this is what's happening with the numbers. That's what's going on. And I'm thinking about the psychology, what's going on there, right? I see this cool new app. Oh, it's a subscription. Fine, I'll try it. I'll either take my credit card out immediately or I'll, set a date on my calendar to cancel if I don't like it. But then that sets up an expectation in my mind that I'm not fully committed. I'm not fully invested, right? And so then I have converted on some of the things like that, but sometimes I haven't. It's a super interesting challenge that every subscription app, they have to know their cohort. They have to know who they're marketing to and who actually fits the bill, right? Who will actually convert, because some of those people will convert down the line, but you're not getting that immediate optimization data from them, as you mentioned. So your targeting and your audiences are all screwed.
Yeah, totally. And especially in the early days when you're like probably not aware of these kind of mechanics and when you're trying to find product market fit and you're basing your whole business and every decision based on that one channel and driving a few users because that's all you have and you probably don't have a ton of budget. And
Mm-hmm.
then turns out kind of it's been not the perfect cohort that you're buying and that's what you base all your decisions on, then that's of course not an ideal situation.
Yep.
So I think there is a time and place where you want to think about like, should I have a trial? Does it even make sense to for me? Or maybe should I move to the web where I can have a paid trial easily, which then
Mm-hmm.
still you can have kind of ask for a little bit of user intent if they have to pay $1-2 that will most likely already sort out these users that just start and leave right away. And other things I would definitely keep in mind is, like how does this differ on an audience basis, and can you help Meta to can you steer it in a direction that makes this easier for you? For example, through age targeting, many apps these days do exclude under 25, some even under 30, because conversion tends to be higher with older age groups that have higher purchasing power in the end. But then also creative strategy is a big lever here. So if you're optimizing for a trial, then at least make sure that you always check your results from your creatives on an age breakdown, so that you see which creatives are driving younger age groups, which ones are sending older ones, so that you can optimize for these older ones without having necessarily to restrict the algorithm, but still kind of guiding it in the right direction.
That's why the grandmas are in all the ads. It's amazing. It's cool the way you use creative for targeting. Okay, this is the potpourri episode. We're throwing everything at. We're going second topic right off the bat here. Meta. I think I saw something from you on LinkedIn, or else this was in our chat that we had earlier via email. You're seeing a growing awareness that Meta is multiple channels. And everybody kind of knows that to some extent, right? There's been Instagram, there's been Facebook, right? There's been other opportunities in maybe Messenger, WhatsApp, that sort of thing. But just even Facebook itself, or even Instagram itself, there's different placements there, and they're different beasts. Talk about that.
Yeah, they are. And I think there was more awareness for this back in the days when you would still target single placements, for example, or like choose placements yourself and say, I'm going to make a campaign for Instagram stories now, and then I'm going to make a campaign for the Facebook feed. And back then,
now
I
it's
feel like
AI's fault.
yeah, kind of. So back then, people had to make these decisions more consciously, and then you were aware, that's what I said, and then I see different behaviors in traffic, and I got a good understanding of, oh, well, Facebook feed might be a good place to be for me. These days, everything is on like Advantage Plus, as they call it. So they call all the shots. You just put in all the placements. By now, it's, I don't know, 25, 30. I lost count as well. A ton of things in there where I wouldn't even know where to find them. And in the end, Meta will take decisions on where your money is spent based on, again, the signals that you're sending them, but also based on the creative that you're using. So different placements for Meta do, in the end, lend themselves more heavily to a certain creative type. For example, Reels or stories are made for short form video, UGC style. So anything that is close to like a TikTok, while something like the Facebook feed is much more reliant on static creatives. They're like 1-to-1, maybe 4-to-5. You can even try 16-to-9. So you can see how in the end, uploading a different creative to an ad set will result in a different placement mix. And with that placement mix, then comes a different demographic, because on Facebook, I'm not on Facebook anymore. I think I'm not sure who is, but from my kind of age targeting, I can see that it's definitely a bit of an older demo. While something like Instagram skews a bit younger, and Instagram Reels even more so. So Reels is much closer to like a TikTok. It's low intent. It's people consume a ton of these short form videos. So you will have view through traffic much more, where people watch 10 clips and then afterwards go to the app store, look up your app. So there's totally different behaviors based on where your money is spent. So when you look at campaign performance, don't just look at the blended numbers and see, okay, my cost per trial was $15. You really want to know where did that money go, so that you get a better understanding of the audience behind this, because conversion will be totally different. Again, if you're optimizing for an upper funnel proxy like a trial, older people tend to convert better, younger people not. So you will have to set different goals and expectations for these different cohorts.
Clearly, you're just biased against people by age. I mean, it's like, no, I'm just joking. There's so much of what you just said. I mean, I just chatted with Lorenzo Rossi from Replug recently, and he was like, Advantage Plus, never use the AI tools for setting up. If you just go and say, yes, fine, you do it for me. I mean, he's had disasters with that, where money's just pouring into wrong audiences or wrong spaces.
I think I saw one of his posts about it. Especially with like that Advantage Plus label, I think it's so confusing to most people, because you can apply it on like different hierarchy levels. So you can have a Advantage Plus campaign or a manual campaign, but even then within a manual campaign, you can have different Advantage Plus components. And then, for example, if you set your audience to Advantage Plus and then do age targeting,
audience, yes,
then they are still allowed to target other age groups, because it's just a suggestion. So kind of people get very confused by this. And then if you don't pay very close attention to where your money goes, then it can go sideways quite a bit. I've seen Lorenzo's post with like tons of money spent on like 18-to-24 because age targeting was set up the wrong way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. They're good at that. A client of mine just actually got a prompt in their ads manager where they have like an AI chatbot that helps you optimize your campaigns that you can talk to. I'm interested to look into that.
Well, it always is interesting, right? I mean, because every marketer is using AI right now, right? But the question is, who's AI and what does the AI do, and who does the AI work for? Maybe it's very helpful, but it doesn't work for you, or does it work for the platform or the ad network? That's always a question you have to ask yourself, obviously, and usually it's a combination of multiple things. But you want to be aware of that. It's also interesting what you just said about Meta static images. It's funny how that just keeps coming back. I mean, it's like the most boring, most original digital ad form. And yet I keep hearing from people, don't forget about that. They convert well. Shocker. We have ads, we have video, we have playable, we have end cards, we have all kinds of things going on. And still, in some cases and on some platforms, that boring old static image works.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Especially in like a combination, right? Like oftentimes also then different ad formats or ad types tailored to different awareness stages. And like aesthetic is much better at doing like a retargeting job, because if people are already aware of your brand, then aesthetic means you control every element and you can be sure everything on there is seen by the user that the impression is served to. So if you kind of make that well branded, then you can be much more sure that someone will pick up on it who's engaged with your brand before or who's seen one of your videos before and showed interest. So like I never set up retargeting campaigns like you used to back in the days, where you had like retargeting audiences and try to kind of narrow down who's been, I don't know, in your app and hasn't purchased, or who's been on your website and hasn't done anything. The way I think about it is, again, just using creative for targeting. And then if you create an ad that talks about a common objection that people have who have interacted with your product before but then didn't purchase, and you make it branded, then you can be sure whoever interacts with that will be someone who has basically had that objection and seen your brand before. And that's how I would think about setting up retargeting. And static ads lend themselves well for this more like warmer mid-funnel audience that maybe have seen a video before, got introduced to your brand, but then aesthetic is just the better way to move them down that funnel.
Very, very, very cool. And talking about funnels, we're going to move to our third topic, web to app. It's interesting. You mentioned that as we were chatting in the beginning, you're saying it's growing, growing, growing. I said, hey, yeah, I'm working on the quarterly trends report for Q3 for 2024 for Singular. And I'm seeing a massive expansion in spend on the web. There's so much going on here, and there's so many different reasons for it. If you have cross-platform thing going on for your brand, for how you deliver, whether it's games or apps or utilities or subscription information, there's where you want to take payments and how much you want to spend on your App Store percentage, Google Play percentage. There's just, hey, it's a total cross-platform world, and I got to get them somewhere and then get them out to wherever they want to go. There's so many reasons to do it, and there's so much better ways to do it. Now, talk about web to app.
Yeah, definitely kind of one of the big topics right now. I'm actually not sure like when or how it now exploded again. It was really, really big when Scan first came out, and everyone was like, yeah, whatever, we're just going to move to the web and everything is going to be fine. And then somehow that didn't work. And now, like a few years later, it feels like everyone is hyped up again. It feels like, okay, we can actually move to the web.
It's hype cycle. It's hype cycle.
Yeah,
It's amazing. It's amazing. Trough of disillusionment. Doesn't work. Now the technology evolves a little bit. We can make it work. Maybe.
Yeah. It definitely seems to be working for a lot of people these days, and like more and more like MarTech solutions are coming up. Like I just came across this like screenshot tool that helps you like do competitor analysis for these web to app funnels, that gives you kind of the whole funnel screenshotted down into Figma. Then there are these drag and drop creation solutions like a Funnel Fox, web to wave, onboarding online. So yeah, a lot happening in that space, which I find really, really interesting, because to me, the web in the end gives us a lot more freedom to play around with and create different, like in the end, funnels and different onboarding experiences for a user. And the App Store and product, your app onboarding is very limited in a way, because the app is mostly going to be the same for everyone. It can be personalized then based on inputs, but otherwise everyone starts kind of with a default experience. And also the App Store, I mean, you can't do much there. Like, you can alter your screenshots, play around with like your app icon, but then the whole framework is the same for everyone. And I feel on the web, you can move away from that and really come up with something that is going to move the needle far more than that other funnel would. But of course, it's hard, because total freedom means, yeah, you can also fuck it up in the end.
Yes, you can.
So yeah, I'm like, the first time I really saw web to app at scale was at Blinkist, where we ran like most of our media budget really through these paid content flows, basically. So we had our blog, where we had tons of articles written about ourselves, praising Blinkist as a company, praising the product from different angles that we usually got inspired by from something like a BuzzFeed, different like news outlets, that we kind of copied their headlines, made them into like a branded company headline, and then wrote an article that fits to it. And
Great
we
strategy.
spent
Interesting.
really a lot of money on that. And me coming from gaming, I was like, what? Like, why would people want to read an article and then go into the product? They wanna do the product. They want to play the game. But that was really eye-opening back then. And really what this allowed us to do, coming back to something like a placement mix on Meta, is we had a whole separate campaign structure that weren't app promotion campaigns, but in the end web sales campaigns, which is the objective these days for that. And they send people to that blog article, and the ads looked nothing like ads. They were just lifestyle images with a headline below, so they would look like something that a news page would post. And that allowed us to really, really scale on Facebook feed. It allowed us to spend money on Twitter, which I've never ever seen anyone else do before profitably. And it created this really unique flow, which made a ton of sense, of course, for something like a Blinkist, because it's a news entertainment product. So in the end, it lends itself well to creating this type of flow. But I think that's how you want to kind of think about web funnel creation. Like, how can you create an experience that makes a lot of sense for your product, but then also for the channel that you want to deliver this on? And that, like, right now, many apps are doing these quiz flows, because that's where the marketing tech is coming in and building them, and they're just very popular. But I think that's just one way of doing it. Articles is another, but you could really think about, like, how can we deliver that aha moment to a user that they kind of understand our core value prop super quickly. So ad click, aha moment, and only then actually send them to install and get into the product, because the install is a massive friction point. I mean, usually you have like install rates of like 40-50%. So you're losing a ton of people there. If you are able to serve up that aha moment much more quick on the upper funnel, then I'm sure your down funnel will look a lot stronger.
There's so many benefits there, right? I love that flexibility and freedom, because you can build an experience on the web, and you have the total flexibility and freedom to do that. If you have a somewhat more complex story to tell, if you have it's a benefit that isn't, you can't boil it down to 3 seconds, right, or something like that, then that's super useful. Also, when they hit your website, they start to become your customers, not Apple's, not Google's, right? You start to have some information on them, especially if they sign up, say hi. You can retarget them based on a cookie while those exist, other things like that. So there's a lot of benefits to that in a lot of different ways. Okay, I think we're on
and
our
there's
fourth
so many
topic.
products with like product categories with restrictions, right? Like in finance or in
Right.
kids apps, you can be a lot more creative on the web and really try to figure out, like, how can we create a good first user experience without having to worry about actually adjusting the product, getting people through KYC in finance. So usually your onboarding conversion rates in some of these categories will be terrible. So serving them up something valuable and get them hooked early on can be a good primer before you make them do all that stuff you need to make them do.
That's another reason I didn't even think about. Absolutely makes a ton of sense. Okay, I think we're on our fourth topic now. I'm going to hit scan. And I mean, scan is an interesting topic right now. And it's definitely related in my mind to what I'm calling platform probabilistic, like AEM on Meta.
Mhm.
Every platform's doing that, whether you're Google, Meta, Snap, every TikTok, every platform is doing that. And they're saying, hey, you know what? We're modeling our conversions, we're modeling our impact, and here it is. And in my mind, a lot of that, I know that started to come out before Scan. But in my mind, a lot of that is related to Scan, and it's the platform saying, "Hey, we want to measure how we want to measure, and we want to have more control over the measurement that goes on our platforms, on advertising that happens on our platforms." And
Mhm.
then you've got marketers who are saying, like, "Okay, on iOS, I've got these numbers from Scan. I have these numbers from my platform, which, by the way, hasn't moved on to Scan 4. They're still on Scan 3, and I doubt they'll ever
Mhm.
get there, and I doubt they'll ever get to AAK as well, Ad Attribution Kit. And then I've got these numbers for my MMP, and then here's what's actually happening inside my app." And then we have this whole world with lots of numbers floating around, but very little consistency, perhaps.
Yeah, it's very confusing these days. I would say, I mean, yeah, as you said, kind of AEM on Meta. Meta is kind of a one answer to like Scan not working the way it should, and I think, yeah, Apple hasn't done a great job at addressing that. And in the end, we're now, yeah, every platform is creating this. Everyone now, like TikTok is coming out with their own SDK, so they can collect these signals in the app and serve that model. So in the end, we're gonna be in a place where everyone does fingerprinting in the end, and Scan just doesn't develop in a way that it actually becomes a viable option, which feels weird that Apple just leaves it running like that. Because in the end, the whole idea behind it, that we wanted to get rid of the IDFA, wasn't a bad one. It led to major disruption, but still it made a ton of sense. So it's weird that we're now going back in a similar direction, just using other identifiers. But yeah, I've been a huge advocate to use Scan in your campaign mix, and to make sure that you keep up with the changes and know how it works and have a good idea of how you can still evaluate performance. But I must say, by now, I don't have any accounts right now anymore which are running Scan at all, because AEM performance is just stronger.
Mhm.
And you don't have all the issues when it comes to privacy thresholds, when it comes to the post-back delay, trying to figure out, okay, when did my conversions actually happen? What was my performance on day one, day two? So yeah, by now I stopped fighting against it. I gave up, and I'm now using AEM on Meta for my clients. Really, if it's possible. Again, some verticals can't. But yeah, the other big thing here you mentioned, like evaluating performance and then having all these different numbers, is definitely an interesting one, because yeah, they're like, in the end, whom to trust. I mean, Meta, of
Mhm.
course, will be biased because they want to, of course, show good performance. Then you have your MMP showing different numbers, and then you have your blended that somehow needs to match all of that happening on your UA channels. Yeah, I early on with my clients, I'm usually working with smaller app developers, and we usually try to, like, we're tracking how basically our discrepancy of what's happening in blended compared to the reported UA conversions, and then always try to build an incrementality test where we like look at what happens if we start Meta in a new market, how much does it report by itself, and how much this is actually happening on blended. And I must say, for most part, I do see Meta underreporting. So I don't see them showing up these crazy numbers I hear from like Google, where they kind of model out 3x the conversions that actually happened. So I feel they're doing like a okay job, or like trying to be realistic about it. But on the other hand, it's also such a black box. Like, if things break, and I recently had the issue, Meta had like an SDK change. They started tracking trials and subscriptions not under purchase anymore, but under trial and subscription if you were
Mhm.
auto-logging them. Quite technical, but so in the end, if you were optimizing for that event, they just changed your conversion event, and that means you weren't tracking any numbers on your campaigns anymore. And
Oops.
One of my accounts is still recovering from that, because then we had to like change tracking and send these other events, and we never got back to the same basically
Ouch.
attribution match rate. And it's a black box in the end. Meta doesn't tell you which identifiers they're using for it. And you need, especially if you're auto logging, that means they need to be able to access your code properly so they can read out what's happening. There are so many variables here, and it can be like really a tough task to figure out why Meta is attributing a certain way. And yeah, that's one of the challenges that comes with this, and them handling your attribution for you.
In other words, everything changes, everything stays the same. It's always a
I
challenge,
know.
and the challenge is always moving.
True that. And I
Wow.
mean, what I do like about it is that there's definitely much more awareness for attribution being flawed, and it's been like that for the longest time. And I feel by now the argument to be made that the numbers in Ads Manager aren't the one to trust is a much easier one, because it's just very, very clear. While in 2018, 2019, before ATT, you had to kind of discuss hard why like you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to kind of evaluate your ad channel at a better performance, because you basically saw these other effects like view through, how many people were on what was it called back then, limited ad tracking.
Yes.
So all that stuff was already happening, and I feel these days everyone is aware, okay, attribution just doesn't work, and we need to figure this out ourselves based on our true numbers. And I think that's actually a step in the right direction.
It is a step in the right direction because it's an acknowledgement that all measurement is interesting, all measurement is flawed. And if you can combine multiple modes of measurement, you're more likely to arrive at something that is closer to the truth. And the reality is that even the measurement that we have, we know this sort of last click or even sort of partially trying to do some kind of multi-touch attribution, are super, super flawed just from their ability to capture the elements that really matter, and B, their absolute inability to capture anything that's going on inside the headspace of your actual target, your actual customer, your user, your player, right? And so, I mean, all of these are indicators, and all indicators are valuable. And from what I've been seeing, the more you can get, and if you can actually use some smart data science to bring them together, unified measurement is what Singular calls it, you get a better picture of what's going on. So I think scan still matters and is still valuable, especially for the larger customers larger marketers that have some data scientist team, because it is, after all, a deterministic signal. It's not granular, but it has its value. Severe limitations, but has some value. But you also hit another topic, which I wanted to bring up. You brought up incrementality. I had Triple M on my kind of punch list of things I wanted to mention with you. It's interesting because you mentioned you're generally working with smaller customers, but they are doing incrementality tests to just double check, sanity check these numbers that I'm getting from this ad network, this platform. They make sense. It's moving the needle, and things are actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, incrementality test is probably it sounds very scientific, but of course, for a small app, anything is an incrementality test, because if you don't
Yes.
advertise in the market and then you start, then you just see what's happening on your baseline, and you can compare that against what the ad channel reports. So it makes things a lot more easy, and I'm very grateful to be in a position where I'm working with clients where it's easier, because I like, if we were working with like 8 paid channels and had a ton of organic, I wouldn't want to be the one trying to figure out what's working, what's not. So yeah, but in the end, I think that's definitely always a good sanity check to build in, and trying to figure out like what's really the lift on my baseline from
Mm-hmm.
these things that I'm running. And yeah, I'm working in like an amplitude mix panel, any product analytics, a lot more these days than I was when I was still like pre-ATT and a UA manager back then, because simply I didn't care too much what's happening there. In the end, I trusted the numbers that our marketing analytics team gave me based on more upper funnel signals. And also from that perspective, I feel it's been a like good development, at least for me, that I had to like look into down funnel more and figure out, well, actually there's like huge differences and like what's happening for different demographics. How does Google compare to Facebook? So yeah, kind of if you stay curious and really dig in, I think that's in the end going to serve you well for like understanding performance, but then also inspiring you for experiments to run and changes to ask for in the company you work for.
I think that's a perfect spot to end our potpourri episode. If you stay curious and dig in, there's probably no space that's more required than in mobile marketing. The pace of change, everything that's happening, that's going on all the time. And yeah, that does matter. Having to learn everything all over again for the 10th time to stay relevant in the industry you joined like 5 years ago.
And who knows, maybe in a few years, Apple will build their own really proper attribution software, and you will just see in App Store Connect what your campaign performance is. And that's kind of what I'm dreaming about, because they would be able to and just solve this pain point. And I feel like it would help them as well, because it would just make sure the App Store grows bigger and bigger. So yeah, if anyone from Apple listens to this, please fix Scan.
I think that'd be amazing. I think that would be. I honestly don't see a lot from Apple right now in terms of. You mentioned there's a void, right? So Scan 4 was there. It's not really adopted by the majors. Like if you're talking Meta, if you're talking Google, if you're TikTok recently put it on, but you have to actually flip a switch in your panel on TikTok to activate it. And then forget about AAK. Nobody's even talking about implementing that on the ad network level. I really kind of feel like, Apple has maybe checked a box there and said, hey, done. That's our privacy solution. And here we go. We're off to other things. I don't honestly know that. I have no insider information whatsoever. But the other thing that makes me feel like there's a bit of a dead end there is that platforms have insulated themselves. The large platforms have insulated themselves with platform probabilistic to say, hey, this is how you measure our performance. And it's under their own control. So there, like you said, there's grains of salt that you need to be taking all the time there, and you need to compare it. You need to do your incrementality testing. You need to check with your other numbers that you're getting from other sources. But basically, platform says we want to be in charge of how people measure what our performance. And they've been pretty successful doing that. You said it yourself, at least in Meta's case, it's pretty good. Doesn't seem too biased in their favor. There's some challenges with Google. TikTok is very new on this. We'll see how that grows and evolves over time, right? Snap as well. But as that grows, the need for implementing Scan, as you mentioned, with your clients at a certain size, I just will avoid that complexity. We'll see where things go. We'll see where things go.
Yeah, what they definitely could do better is really giving you an understanding of how well the signal that you're sending is actually usable for attribution at the moment, because I see massive differences there based on your setup. So are you sending your conversions through an MMP and then to Meta? Are you sending it through the Facebook SDK? Which identifiers are available? Is there even other parties involved? So I've seen people trying to send their stuff from like Revenue Cat to MMP to Meta, and then what's left by the time it arrives at Meta helps you attribute maybe 5% of the conversions that are actually happening. So you want to really make sure to optimize that signal in the beginning and kind of try to get to a good match rate where you see that, okay, I see in my baseline, I'm driving 100 trials a day. I want to see a good chunk of that in Meta, 70, 80%, so that Meta actually has signal to work with. And they don't have any quality scoring on that like they do on the web. On the web, they will tell you our match rate is 5 out of 10, and these are the identifiers we would recommend you to apply attached to your events so we can match even more people. That doesn't exist for apps these days, so oftentimes it's not visible to anyone that their setup is suboptimal, and then people rely on that data to optimize and think their channel isn't working, or in the end see bad performance, but it's really just due to a bad tech setup. And I feel like there's not a bunch of education done around it. Like they just threw AEM in there. By now it's the default, so your campaigns just optimize for it. And if you set it up the wrong way, no one will ever tell you.
Wow. And if you don't get somebody in who's been there, done that 5, 10, 50, 100 times and knows how to set it up, knows what the right events are, knows how to make sure that the right things are getting back to the right places, you're kind of screwed.
Pretty much, yeah. And even then, like, it differs so much also based on, like, are you on React Native or are you on Flutter? Are you on, like, whatever you're coding your app in? And then is it set up with the Meta SDK through MMP? So how all that code in the end interacts with each other. And like for the most part, I'm not that technical. Like I by now saw a bunch of times that it didn't work, but I couldn't say why. So it's really hard to like pinpoint these challenges and be in a like fruitful discussion with a developer or about like why it might not be working. So yeah, Meta could definitely do a much better job when it comes to that, because this is the backbone for everything you do on the channel.
Signal, absolutely. Yeah. Marcus, this has been an utter pleasure. It's been worth the wait. So I'm glad that we made it work. Thank you for this time. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. And yeah, have a good start to the day. I think it's still early for you.